Yep, Simon Hart. I'm the, until last week, the MP for Carmarthen West and South Pembrokeshire. That takes us all the way up to Carmarthen Town. Many years ago, I was a chartered surveyor and land agent based in Carmarthen in Spilman Street, and that took me into the Towie Valley, the Teifi Valley, and all points up to sort of Aberystwyth in the north and Newport Gwent in the east. So I sort of worked the area and also done a bit of fishing on both the Towie and the Teifi over the years. It's a good question, because sometimes it's not just about landscape. Landscape is clearly special, but landscape without people is a bit meaningless. And I think the combination of the landscape and the communities which live in it, make a living off it, enjoy it, visit it, that's, for me, rural communities are complicated and important, and often, to be honest, often quite badly and willfully misunderstood. We're not talking about any old landscape here, if there is such a thing left in Wales these days. We are talking about probably one of the finest landscapes, unspoilt landscapes, non-industrial landscapes, which probably hasn't changed much in several hundred years. And that in itself is a massive income generator for our area, because people want to come and work here, they want to come and live here, they want to come and enjoy that landscape and take part in it and be part of it. So it has huge economic benefits for our community. So anything which damages that, anything which compromises that, anything which just relegates us to being just the same as any other industrial landscape is it's not a position you just walk into without giving it a lot more thought than seems to be the case this time, and so these are areas, whether officially or otherwise, these are areas of outstanding natural beauty, and once they've gone, they don't come back. Yeah, I think listen, you're talking to a politician in an election period. Of course, we're going to be in favour and against everything that we need to be. I think we're probably underestimating alternative technologies, for example, floating offshore wind. Now, where I currently represent in South Pembrokeshire, there is a potential for a colossal offshore development in the Celtic Sea, which would completely swamp anything that we are capable of producing on land. And we do so without any damage to the environment, without any damage to the landscape, minimal interruption for shipping, I'm told, and the ability to create thousands of jobs in Neath Talbot and in Milford Haven, the Port of Milford Haven. And so, for me, it just seems we can achieve all of the renewable objectives that we need and want to, but without causing lasting and irreparable damage to areas like this. So I have to say I was in favour of the sort of moratorium on onshore wind, which was a UK government position, and I'm still minded towards that, not because I want to be, tin-eared about our increasing need to rely on renewables, but because I think there's probably a better way of doing that. Marine renewables as well as floating offshore wind seems to me to be where we should be putting our attention and our money. They could. I mean, ultimately, the Senate can insist it's a government, can insist on whatever it wants. I think it's nervous about the fact that if it were to do that, the developers would just melt away. Now, that might suit us, because they would look at that and it would be a phenomenal cost. Now, I would argue that the Towie Valley, there isn't a sort of compromise there, because there's an intrinsic value, aesthetic value of the landscape, which to me is an overwhelming argument. I think that if we were to go down, or let's say the Senate was to go down that route, what it will probably do is drive the developers into other forms of renewable investments. Actually, is that a bad thing? No. So you might not get the wind farms, and you might then not get the infrastructure which connects the wind farms to the grid. And there will be those who make a legitimate argument about, well, we are again, that we're running contrary to what our obligations ought to be. Not if we can meet our obligations via another way. And if the renewables industry is therefore able to and willing to invest in other forms of renewable energy, then actually we achieve the same outcome by a less damaging route. So if that's what happens, they can say, put the cables underground. The developers will say, no, sorry, we're not going to do that. It's too expensive, not bothered. We're going to stick a few billion quid into the Celtic offshore wind project. Well, actually, is that the end of the world? No, it's not actually probably quite a good thing. It's a good question because, of course, there are some elements of energy production and infrastructure which are responsibility of UK government. It's often dependent on scale and actually the route that the particular infrastructure may take. On the other hand, a lot of it, and these particular projects we're talking about, are fully devolved. Can Welsh Government, can the Senedd face down a big challenge from a developer? Well, I think it would be more likely to succeed in that if it was, linked, joined at the hip with UK government in its endeavours to do that. But ultimately, it is a devolved matter. It can do, as we see from time to time, it can do what it wants in this area. Yeah, well, I think two things emerge from that. One of which is if that is the outcome, then I think that sends an incredibly strong message to Welsh Government that the residents of the Towy Valley and the Tywi Valley are not happy with what they're proposing. That is an important position. Leave aside my fortunes or not. What it then enables me to do, if I was the MP for the area, whether or not I'm based in Cardiff or in London, it gives me the platform and the justification and the authority, if you like, to go not only to developers but to planners, whether it's Carmarthen County Council, to go to the Senedd, to the relevant ministers, and say that these projects are unacceptable. And I have legitimate reason to say that. I've got legitimacy because I can turn to an electorate and say, these people voted for me in order for me to deliver this message to you. I am now delivering that message to you. Now, as I say, in terms of UK government policy, if I'm in government, that's great. We can do something about that. If it's, the local MP and the Senedd, it sets it up very powerfully, I think, to be able to say, and others will do the same, to say enough is enough. I think I'm trying to imagine what this would be like for me personally. I live in a lovely rural area. If it was damaged by this, I'd be sort of mortified by the fact that it is just another nail in the coffin of rural communities and landscapes which are ever diminishing anyway. And I think whether the scale of that is large or small, it's a profoundly depressing position for us to get ourselves into when there are alternatives. And it's not about whether the value of our houses goes down or whether our businesses are compromised by a reduction in tourists or anything. It's a bit more subliminal, it's a bit more emotional than that. And I just, I've known people, we all know people who've had their landscapes ruined, their quality of life destroyed, their dreams shattered. And if we can avoid that happening to people in this area, then it's a fight worth having. I think the other thing is that, it's never over till it's over. And I think a lot of the time it feels like it's a very one-sided battle. But actually, if you just look at the recent issues over Mr. Bates and the post office, which right at the beginning nobody ever thought would go anywhere, but by sheer bloody mindedness and dogged campaigning, in the end, they've scored a remarkable victory against the odds. And it's a lesson in patience and resilience, really. And, these things are very time-consuming, they're very expensive, they're pretty soul-sapping, but they are worth it. We can talk about economic loss or social loss and those things which are measurable, but the spiritual loss of a landscape, I'm going to sound sort of like I'm just being some Clyde Cookland here, but if you know it, you know it. to that expression is, but for those who understand, no explanation is necessary. For those who don't know, explanation is possible. And I feel like that if you're watching this, you'll know what I mean. I touched on one, which I think is sort of patience and resilience. I think that these tend to be long, drawn-out, arduous, expensive, and soul-destroying operations, and the tactics sometimes of the companies with which we will all end up dealing is to just slowly just sort of dry you out in terms of your available energy and cash, and basically just wear you down. And so I think that whatever is decided, be ready for a long, drawn-out operation. And I think the other thing is, though, this is all about, I hate to say this, but it is all about politics. And the people who will make the decisions on all of this aren't energy companies or developers, they're politicians. And there'll be politicians down the road in Caerfyrddin in the county council who make decisions around their local planning guidelines and local development plan and all that sort of stuff. There's the politicians in the Senedd, which up till recently have been a combination of Plaid Cymru and Labour, whose combined policy has facilitated this whole risk in the first place. Sorry to sound partisan for a minute. And then thirdly, it's the what pressure can UK government provide over the top of all of that in making sure that we represent the views of the whole of the UK, because these things are not, the desecration of the Tawy Valley is something which actually affects the whole of the UK. It's not just the people who live in the Tawy Valley. We feel the worst of it, but actually it's sort of slightly wider consequences than that. So UK government can also have an effect on energy policy. It can also have an effect on planning policy. Some of the things that we do in UK government are always reflected by then passed down through Welsh Government to local authorities here, for obvious reasons. It's a bit arduous, it's a bit long-winded, but that's how it works. And so I think the ultimate aim must be to get 3 legislatures, Council, Senedd and Westminster, to agree that the arguments against these measures are compelling. Do that, and we've won. I think that, not everybody will be as attuned to all of this as maybe we are, and that's not a criticism. It's just, people have got a lot of stuff going on in their lives and stuff, and don't always have time to go down the local council, look at the maps, what have you. But I would say this: there is a real and genuine risk that the landscape which we take for granted every day, we drive up and down the roads around here, and every time we engage in any activity in our area, there is a genuine risk that the landscape which we look out through the car window or the bus window, whatever it is, will be gone, and it will be irreparable when that happens. And that means that the time to take action around these things is now. And not also to do what we all do, myself included, was always leave it to somebody else. There's always somebody else going to have the public meeting and the local thing. That can't be that anymore. It has to be all of us. And it doesn't matter if what the proposals are affect you just a tiny bit or affect you a heck of a lot. It's still important, because as long as we can present an accurate image of a community which is united in its opposition to a proposal, as I say, whether it's the smallest business or the largest business, that will eventually filter through to the politicians, people like me, and that will eventually filter through to the developers who realize, this is not going to go anywhere here. We're going to be involved in 10 years' worth of legal challenge. It's going to cost us a fortune. And frankly, we can go down the road to Milford Haven and get involved in some offshore wind project or whatever it might be at a fraction of the cost and start getting some return on our cash a bit sooner. So it is a war of attrition, but it only works if everybody is part of it and early on. So don't leave it to the guy next door with the poster in the garden. I'm afraid this is going to take all of us, a day a week or a day a month for quite a long time. But it will be worth it.